Right, let's talk about engines. Most of them are terribly sensible things, full of pistons going up and down, like a Victorian factory worker on a very long shift. It's all terribly efficient and reliable, I suppose, but it's also as boring as a lecture on Belgian municipal drainage law. Then you have the rotary engine. It's not an engine, really. It's a work of pure, unadulterated genius, conceived by a man, Felix Wankel, who clearly thought the normal way of doing things was for people who enjoy queuing. It's a spinning triangle of power, a Dorito of detonation that goes fizz, pop, and then you're doing 1,000,000 miles an hour. The appeal was immediate and obvious to anyone with a soul. Instead of all that chuffing metal changing direction thousands of times a minute, the Wankel engine had a rotor that just rotated. It was beautifully simple, like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but in a good way. This meant it was incredibly small and light for the amount of power it produced. You could practically fit one in your carry-on luggage. This allowed car designers to create low, sleek, and impossibly beautiful machines. It was an engine that promised a future of sports cars that looked like they'd just flown in from another, much more exciting galaxy. Think about the cars it gave us. The Mazda Cosmo Sport looked like something Jane Fonda would drive in a sci-fi film. It was otherworldly, and later the RX-7, a car so perfectly balanced and so utterly devoted to the business of going sideways that it became an icon. These weren't just cars, they were statements. They told the world that you weren't interested in sensible fuel economy or practicality. You were interested in drama, noise, and the sheer, unbridled joy of an engine that felt like it was powered by explosions and witchcraft, which, to be fair, it pretty much was. The core of its magic was its smoothness. A piston engine is a violent affair, a series of controlled detonations kicking metal up and down. The rotary, by contrast, was like a turbine. The power delivery was a seamless, ever-building wave that just kept on coming. There were no vibrations, just a rising, high-pitched scream that sounded like nothing else on Earth. It was a sophisticated, elegant solution to the brutish problem of internal combustion. It was the sort of engine you'd expect to find in a gentleman's rocket ship, not a family saloon. And for a glorious moment, it seemed like the future. The noise. We have to talk about the noise. A rotary engine doesn't rumble or roar like a V8. It doesn't snarl like a flat six. It screams. It's a manic, high-pitched, metallic shriek that starts as a buzz and builds into a full-on air raid siren wail as you surge towards the red line. This isn't a sound you just hear with your ears. It's a sound you feel in your bones, in the fillings in your teeth. It's the sound of 1,000 angry hornets being fed into a jet engine. And it is absolutely, unequivocally one of the greatest noises ever to come out of an exhaust pipe. It's pure mechanical theater. This unique soundtrack was the Rotary's calling card. When a Mazda RX-7 blasted past, you knew exactly what it was without even looking. It was a sound that belonged on a racetrack, specifically Le Mans in the dead of night. It spoke of speed, of an engine spinning at speeds that would make a normal engine disintegrate into a cloud of very expensive shrapnel. The red line on a Rotary wasn't a suggestion, it was a destination you were actively encouraged to visit as often as possible. Driving a rotary-powered car properly meant keeping the revs high, living in that noisy, thrilling part of the power band. This character defined the cars it powered. They weren't just modes of transport, they were experiences. The RX series in particular built a fanatical following because of this. Owners weren't just car enthusiasts, they were disciples of the spinning triangle. They understood its quirks, they forgave its flaws, and they lived for that moment when the road opened up and they could unleash that incredible, addictive scream. It was an engine for people who loved driving, not for people who simply needed to get from A to B. It was passionate, demanding, and utterly intoxicating. Of course, not everyone loved it. Your neighbors, for instance, probably weren't massive fans when you started it up at 6 in the morning. To the uninitiated, it could sound broken, like a food blender trying to chew through a brick. But that was their problem. For those who got it, the sound was a symbol of engineering purity and raw performance. It was the sound of an engine working in perfect, spinning harmony, unburdened by the clumsy back-and-forth motion of pistons. It was the sound of the future, as we imagined it, in the 1970s, and it was brilliant. Now, for the bad bits, and let's be honest, there were quite a few. The rotary engine, for all its genius, had a few character flaws. The biggest one, the one that owners would whisper about in hushed tones, was the apex seals. These were the tiny metallic strips at the tips of the spinning Dorito that were responsible for keeping the combustion chambers sealed. They were the Achilles heel of the entire design. They had a tendency to wear out, and when they did, your glorious, screaming engine would suddenly have all the compression of a wet sponge. The result was a very expensive bill. This made rotary ownership a bit of a lottery. You could have one that ran for 100,000 miles without a hiccup, or you could have one that decided to lunch its seals on the way back from the dealership. It gave the engine a reputation for being fragile, a delicate flower that needed constant attention and the right kind of oil, fed to it at the right time of day, probably by a trained shaman. This wasn't entirely fair, as a well-maintained rotary could be perfectly dependable, but the horror stories were enough to scare off many a potential buyer who just wanted a car that started every morning. Then, there was the drinking problem. And I don't mean the owner needing a stiff drink after getting a repair bill. No, the engine itself had an insatiable thirst for two things: petrol and oil. Fuel economy was, to put it mildly, catastrophic. A rotary-powered Mazda RX-8 could get through a tank of super unleaded faster than a politician gets through a promise. You'd watch the fuel gauge plummet with alarming speed, making every long journey a strategic exercise in planning your next visit to a petrol station. You saw more of Britain's shell forecourts than you did of its actual scenery. And the oil, it wasn't leaking it. Not exactly. The engine was designed to inject a small amount of oil directly into the combustion chamber to lubricate those pesky apex seals. This meant you had to top up the oil almost as often as you filled it with petrol. Forget checking your oil once a month. Rotary owners checked it every time they stopped for a packet of crisps. This combination of fragility, thirst, and high maintenance meant that while the enthusiasts loved it, the wider public, the people who buy Ford Fiestas, looked at it as if it were a complicated, expensive, and slightly mad pet. So, the rotary engine was a flawed masterpiece. It was brilliant but thirsty, exciting but fragile. For a while, that was a trade-off people were willing to make for the performance and the noise. But then the world changed. Suddenly, people started caring about things like the environment and not spending your entire salary on fuel. A wave of green thinking, driven by men in sandals with worrying beards, began to sweep across the globe. Governments started introducing pesky things called emissions regulations. And suddenly, the rotary's days as a mainstream engine were numbered. It was a polar bear on a rapidly melting iceberg. The very design that made the rotary so smooth and high-revving also made it inherently dirty. The long, moving combustion chamber resulted in incomplete fuel burn. This meant it spat out a cocktail of unburnt hydrocarbons, the sort of stuff that makes trees sad and gives city dwellers a nasty cough. In the early days, this wasn't a huge problem. But as emissions rules got stricter and stricter, Mazda's engineers had to perform ever more complex acts of technical wizardry just to get the engine to pass the tests. It was like trying to teach a dog to do calculus. It could be done, but it was an awful lot of effort. At the same time, normal piston engines were getting better. A lot better. Engineers using clever things like turbochargers, direct injection, and variable valve timing were squeezing more power out of smaller, more efficient engines. A modern turbocharged four-cylinder could produce the same power as a rotary, but it would use half the fuel and produce a fraction of the emissions. The rotary's key advantage, its power-to-size ratio, was being eroded. It was becoming a big, thirsty fish in a pond that was rapidly being filled with smaller, more efficient fish. This all came to a head with the RX-8. It was a brilliant car in many ways, with 4 doors and sublime handling. But its rotary engine, despite Mazda's best efforts, just couldn't keep up. It failed to meet the new, stringent Euro 5 emission standards that came into force. With sales dwindling and the cost of developing a cleaner version spiraling, Mazda had no choice. In 2012, they quietly pulled the plug. The screaming stopped. The Wankel engine, the spinning Dorito of power, had been regulated and economized into extinction. The world had chosen sense and sensibility over noise and madness, and it was a sadder place for it. For years, it seemed that was it. The rotary was dead, a fascinating footnote in the history of the motor car. We'd occasionally see them at car shows, lovingly maintained by the faithful, but honestly, the idea of a new one rolling off a production line just seemed fanciful. Mazda, the engine's sole guardian, had moved on to creating these excellent, efficient piston engines they called Sky Active. It was all very sensible. But then, a few years ago, whispers started to emerge from Japan. Mazda, it turned out, hadn't forgotten about its spinning triangle. They just had a new and very cunning plan for it. You see, the problem was never really the rotary engine itself, it was the job we were asking it to do. Asking it to directly power the wheels of a car, with all the stopping and starting and changing speeds of daily driving, was like asking a Formula One driver to pilot a canal boat. It was just not what it was good at. A rotary engine is happiest when it's spinning at a constant, steady speed. So what if that's all it did? What if instead of turning the wheels, it just spun a generator to create electricity? Suddenly, all its weaknesses become strengths. This is exactly what Mazda did with the MX-30 REV. This is a car that is, for all intents and purposes, an electric car. It has a battery and an electric motor that drives the wheels. But it also has a tiny single-rotor Wankel engine tucked away under the bonnet. When the battery runs low, the rotary engine quietly fires up, not to drive the car, but to act as a power station, topping up the battery so you can keep going. It's called a range extender, and for this job, the rotary is perfect. Its compact size means it doesn't take up much space, and its smoothness means you barely even notice when it's running. Suddenly, the old problems vanish. Because it runs at a fixed, optimal speed, its fuel efficiency is massively improved. Emissions can be much more easily controlled and optimized for that single running state. Reliability is no longer a major concern because it's operating under a consistent light load, not being thrashed to within an inch of its life on a B road. Mazda had taken the rotary's biggest flaws, and by changing its job description, turned them into non-issues. It was a brilliant bit of lateral thinking. The mad, screaming engine had been given a new, much more sensible job as a power plant administrator. While Mazda was busy reinventing the rotary in its shed, the rest of the car world was heading in one, very clear direction: full electrification. Spurred on by apocalyptic climate reports and governments who love nothing more than a good ban, car companies are falling over themselves to ditch the internal combustion engine entirely. They see a future powered by batteries, a silent utopia where the only sound is the gentle hum of an electric motor and the faint weeping of petrol heads. In places like Norway, almost every new car sold is already electric. The writing, it seems, is on the wall for engines that go bang. This industry-wide stampede towards batteries presents a huge challenge for any kind of internal combustion engine, rotary or not. The argument from the electric evangelists is simple: why bother with a complicated, oily engine at all, even as a generator? Why not just fit a bigger battery? They have a point, I suppose, if you enjoy spending 4 hours at a service station in the rain, waiting for your car to charge while you eat a lukewarm Ginster's pasty. But for many people, the fear of running out of juice, range anxiety, is real. And that's where the rotary range extender makes its case. The problem is that the momentum is against it. The sheer amount of money being invested in battery technology and charging infrastructure is staggering. Companies like BMW are still patenting improvements for piston engines, bless them, but the main event, the big budget blockbuster, is the electric car. A niche, complex solution like a rotary range extender, however clever, risks being drowned out by the noise. It's seen by many as a transitional technology, a stepping stone on the inevitable path to a fully electric future, rather than a destination in its own right. And let's be honest, the idea of a rotary engine being used as a sensible, quiet generator is a bit sad. It's like finding out a retired rock star is now working as a librarian. It's practical, yes. It's clever, certainly. But it lacks the drama, the excitement, the sheer glorious madness that made us fall in love with the rotary in the first place. The automotive world is being pushed towards a future that is clean, quiet, and efficient. And as a result, it's also becoming frightfully, soul-crushingly boring. The rotary, in its new role, was a clever compromise, but it didn't feel like a victory. Just when we thought the rotary had been permanently demoted to the role of a background generator, Mazda did what Mazda does best: They reminded us that somewhere, deep in their corporate soul, there is still a little bit of glorious madness. At the 2025 Japan Mobility Show, just a few weeks ago, they pulled the covers off a concept car called the Vision X-Coupe, and it is absolutely jaw-droppingly fantastic. It's a low, wide, aggressive-looking thing that looks like it wants to steal your lunch money and then do a massive burnout on your lawn. It is, in short, a proper sports car. And the powertrain, oh, the powertrain. This is not some sensible range extender setup. This is the Rotary engine making a spectacular high-performance comeback. The Vision X-Coupe is a plug-in hybrid, but one with a very different philosophy. At its heart is a brand new two-rotor rotary engine complete with a turbocharger. This isn't there just to charge a battery. It's there to provide proper, old-fashioned, tire-shredding power. Working in concert with an electric motor, the total system output is a colossal 510 horsepower. That's more than a new Porsche 911 Carrera S. This is a complete reimagining of the Rotary's purpose. It's not a stepping stone to full electrification, it's an alternative path. It leverages the Rotary's strengths, its compact size, lightweight, and high-revving nature, and pairs them with the instant torque of an electric motor. The result is a hybrid system designed not for ultimate fuel economy, but for ultimate performance. It's Mazda telling the world that the future of the sports car doesn't have to be silent and soulless. It can still have a screaming, petrol-burning heart. The announcement sent a shockwave through the car community. Just as everyone was getting resigned to the idea of electric hot hatchbacks that weigh as much as a small moon, Mazda has shown there might be another way, a way that combines the best of both worlds, the instant, silent shove of electricity for pooling around town, and the savage, high-revving fury of a twin-rotor Wankel for when you find a good road. It's a statement of intent, a defiant roar against the dying of the light. The Rotary isn't just back, it's back with a vengeance. So, what does this all mean? Has Mazda finally cracked the code? I think they might have. For decades, the Rotary was a flawed hero, a brilliant engine hampered by its own nature when forced to do the mundane job of being a normal car engine. The range extender was a clever, if unexciting, solution, but this new high-performance hybrid application, as seen in the Vision X-Coupe, feels like the role the Rotary was born to play in the 21st century. It's no longer the star of the show, but a crucial, power-boosting co-star, and that suits it perfectly. By pairing it with an electric motor, you can neatly sidestep the Rotary's historic weaknesses, its dreadful low-end torque. Not a problem when you have an electric motor providing instant shove from a standstill. Its terrible fuel economy in city traffic doesn't matter because you can just use the battery for that. The electric motor can handle all the boring, low-speed, stop-start stuff that the Rotary hates. This frees up the Wankel to do what it does best, scream its head off at high revs and deliver big, exciting power when you're on a mission. This is the perfect marriage of technology. You get the environmental brownie points of a plug-in hybrid with the ability to do your daily commute on silent, emission-free electricity, but you also get the soul, the character, and the immense performance of a proper sports car engine for the weekends. It eliminates range anxiety completely, and it means the heart of the car is still a glorious mechanical marvel, not a soulless appliance. It's a way of keeping the spirit of internal combustion alive in an increasingly electric world, and that is a very, very good thing. This could be the template for the future of the enthusiast's car. While the mainstream market inevitably shifts to pure EVs for the school run and the commute, there could be a place for these specialized high-performance hybrids. Cars that are designed not for mere transport, but for the sheer joy of driving. The Rotary engine, with its unique characteristics, is perfectly suited for this role. It's no longer trying to be a one-size-fits-all solution. It has become a specialist, a high-performance tool for a high-performance job, and in that, it may have finally found its salvation. So, the Rotary engine. An obituary would be premature. It has been a long and turbulent journey for Felix Wankel's spinning Dorito. It burst onto the scene as a revolutionary, a masterpiece of elegant engineering that promised to change everything. It gave us some of the most beautiful and exciting sports cars ever made, cars that screamed their way into the hearts of enthusiasts around the world. It was a symbol of a future that was fast, loud, and gloriously unconventional. It was, for a time, the coolest engine on the planet, and then, it very nearly wasn't. The world caught up. The Rotary's inherent flaws, its thirst for fuel and oil, its questionable emissions and its reputation for fragility, became too much to bear in an age of environmental consciousness and economic sense. Piston engines got smarter, and the Wankel was left behind, a relic from a more exuberant time. When the RX-8 ceased production in 2012, it truly felt like the end of an era. The mad engine had been tamed by regulations and spreadsheets, the screaming had finally been silenced, and we all thought it was for good. But we were wrong. The report of its death was greatly exaggerated. Mazda, the faithful custodian of the rotary flame, never truly gave up. First, they cleverly repurposed it as a quiet, efficient range extender, a sensible job for a mad engine. But now, with the Vision X-Coupe, they have shown us its true future. Not as a replacement for the piston engine in every car, but as a key component in a new breed of high-performance hybrid, a way to inject soul, noise, and excitement back into the electrified sports car. The rotary engine is not dead, it has evolved. It has adapted to a new world with new rules. It has found a new purpose, one that plays to its strengths and mitigates its weaknesses. It may no longer be the sole power source, but its spirit, that high-revving, screaming, unique character, is set to live on. It's a testament to the engineers at Mazda who refuse to let it die. The Dorito of power will spin again, and the world of motoring will be a much more interesting place for it. Long live the Scream.